How's everybody doing today? In this video, what I wanted to do is compare side to side a Python program with a C# program. Before I did that, I just kind of wanted to remind you the big 5 items in any programming language. Even though C# is going to be different than Python, there's still an incredible amount of similarities. So hopefully you'll be able to draw from your experience in Python and quickly learn C#. We talked about this in Python, but the big 5, okay, we've got input, output. I need to be able to get information from the user and get it into my program. I also need to display information out to my user. The very simple program we're going to start with, miles per gallon. Somehow I need to get, well, how many miles did you drive and how many gallons did you use? And then I need some mechanism to output, okay, I calculated your miles per gallon, here's your miles per gallon. So whether you're using Python or C# or Visual Basic or any other programming language, you need some mechanism to get input and provide output. Next is variables. Pretty much any programming language out there allows you to create variables. Now in Python, they were pretty loose on their variables. We could just name an item and then it was a variable. We didn't have to specify what type it is. Most programming languages are more strictly typed, so you'll see when we create a variable in C#, we have to specify what type of variable it is, meaning is it numeric, is it text, is it date, time, things like that. If statements, pretty much any programming language out there is going to give you the ability to create if statements. We did it in Python, we'll do it in C#. Loops, we did loops in Python, we're going to go and do those in C#. And the last one is functions. Pretty much any programming language out there allows you to compartmentalize a block of code into a function so you can call it as many times as you want in the original program, and you can make it very portable and easy to move over to another program. So with that in mind, these are the 5 items that pretty much every programming language gives you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a typical program that we did in Python. So this is a miles per gallon program. Remember, if I want to use a comment, I can use the little pound sign. That creates a comment. And a comment is just a line of code that's a note to myself. It doesn't get executed. So I've got a comment here. This is a program written by Chris Ford. The next section, what I do is define my variables and I add initial values. So again, to do this program, I'm going to need to have a variable for miles driven. I set that equal to 400, and gallons used I set equal to 13. Remember, in Python, I just specify a name, I specify a value, boom, I'm done with it. So that's that area of Python. The next thing I had to do was I had to do my calculation. I know to get miles per gallon, I have to take miles driven and divide it by gallons used. So I did that. I set it equal to miles per gallon. And the last thing is I just output this information to the user. So I used a print statement in Python to do that, and I added some text. Your miles per gallon is, and then MPG. Now if I run this program in Python, just going to right click on here and go down to run. So it runs it. It says your miles per gallon is 30.7692, etc. So it runs it. Now let's take a look at that exact same program in C#. You might remember from our previous video, since C# is a visual programming language, I have this form. Really the only tool I needed to bring over was a button. So I brought over this button and I changed the property, the text property, calculate MPG. I did not change the name yet, so I'll just use the default name. To get over to our program code, I just double click. Now, again, what I want to do is try to correlate this C# program to our Python program. To do comments in C#, you use 2 forward slashes and they come out in green. The other thing is I've got this private void button 1 dash click. That means any code that's in this private void button 1 that starts here and ends here. This is what's going to be executed when the person clicks on the button. So I've got my comment, says this is when I wrote the program. I said, okay, now I'm going to define my variables. Since C# is a more strictly typed programming language, I can't just say miles driven equals 400. I have to say double miles driven equals 400. Double indicates that it's a numeric variable, and double's just kind of a catch-all, really good for pretty much anything unless you absolutely don't want to use decimal places, and then we use integer. So I've got double miles driven 400, double gallons used equals 13. Notice I had to include the semicolon after each line. Each line of your C# program ends in a semicolon. Next thing I did, I've got a comment, but I said here, new variable double MPG equals miles driven divided by gallons used. Wow, that looks pretty familiar, right? These lines are almost identical to what I had before. And lastly, remember in Python we used a print statement to display the information. In C#, I can use this little thing, it's called messagebox.show. Pretty much does the same thing. It displays the information, but it does so in a kind of a nice little box. But I've got miles per gallon equals, I've got that in quotes. Instead of using a comma between the quotes, the quoted text and the variable, in C# I use a plus sign. So to run this program, I hit start, comes up, here's my form, my button. Now remember, when I click my button, something should happen. I click it, comes up with this message box, miles per gallon equals 30.769230. Remember that number? Same as last time. So even though we're in a totally different environment, a visual programming language versus a non-visual, really the guts of it, the code, is very, very similar. Show them to you one more time. If I go back to my Python, here we are, miles driven 400, gallons used 13. MPG equals miles driven divided by gallons used. Print your miles per gallon is MPG. I look at my Visual Basic one. Boy, not that different. So don't get thrown. I know it's a little bit new. Anytime you get into a new language, you think, geez, this is crazy. I don't know how to do this. But you have an awful lot of experience which you can draw from the 121 class where you took Python and utilize it to make this class not too bad. So anyhow, hopefully this was a helpful video. We will see you next time.